In 1966, 2 years after helping found the ACU, William F. Buckley began broadcasting Firing Line, a televised conversation between Buckley and a series of liberal opponents. It could be erudite, witty, or intense, more stiletto than sledgehammer. Firing Line produced 1,500 episodes over 33 years. The format was simple: a conservative, Buckley, versus a rotating cast of liberals, with both being questioned by a third examiner. In a tribute to Firing Line, please welcome to the CPAC stage today's examiner, the Vice President and General Manager of Townhall Media, Jonathan Garthwaite.
Hi folks, are you ready? All right, so we'll be dividing today's Firing Line into 3 segments. In the first, I'll ask both guests questions. In the second, the guests will go at each other a bit. And then in the third, we'll get some questions from the audience that you'll have to tweet to CPAC News, hashtag John Panel. In the best tradition of Bill Buckley, please make your questions biting and polysyllabic. It's time to introduce our Firing Line contenders. Today's liberal is a former journalist for Newsweek and the New Republic, who now writes for the Daily Caller. He's an author and former Democratic U.S. Senate candidate who blogs for Kausfiles. Ladies and gentlemen, Mickey Kaus. All right. And our conservative, can you guess? Do you know? Is a 10-time New York Times bestselling author, a few of those for Regnery Publishing, syndicated columnist, legal correspondent for Human Events, and is obviously a fixture on cable news. Please welcome our Firing Line femme fatale, Ann Coulter.
Thank you. Thank you. Here?
That's fine, right there. All right. Mickey, you want to close on in so we're close?
Sure.
All right. And we can get started. All right. So first segment, I'm going to go at you guys a bit first. All right. So, Ms. Coulter.
Yes.
As a proud University of Michigan Law School grad, in which class did you learn that the presidents of the United States only have to enforce the laws in which they agree?
No, I learned that at a Grateful Dead concert, not University of Michigan Law School. No, I mean, it is a serious point, the way Obama is. It is unconstitutional legislating from the White House. The Constitution divides up the branches. It's the Congress that's supposed to write the laws, and it's very, carefully designed. You have senators for 6 years and members of the House for 2 years. That's the People's House, and they write the bills. The president can suggest stuff, but his only role in the writing of legislation is to veto it. And if he doesn't veto it, then it becomes law. That is not what Obama has been doing. Most obviously, or at least the most talked about, has been with Obamacare, and I think most egregiously with our immigration laws. At least with Obamacare, people talk about it. and it's kind of a tough one for Republicans, because we were the ones who fought to get these waivers put in. Obama rejected them. Now he's just doing it, but in a way that's unconstitutional. Oh, I just won't apply this heinous law. Well, we won't apply it to Congress, won't apply it to unions, won't apply it to big businesses. Now we won't apply it to small businesses. So a very small number of people are being screwed. They're doing this just for their political advancement, but it's a tough argument for Republicans, because we want the whole thing waived. So how do you complain about him waiving it for only 95% of America? With immigration, it's quite the opposite. You have the Democrats who want more immigrants, and particularly illegal immigrants, because they need brand new voters, just warm bodies, more votes. Amnesty goes through, and the Democrats have 30 million new voters. And I just don't think Republicans have an obligation to forgive lawbreaking just because the Democrats need another 30 million voters. You have big business and businesses generally that want it. You have yuppies who want it. So, you know, in LA, they have gardeners even when they don't have a garden. Labor is so cheap. Those are the big groups that want it, but the only people on the other side are the American people. This is the issue Republicans should be screaming about executive orders on.
Mr. Kaus, can the president pick and choose?
No, he can't, and I'm pretty confident that the Supreme Court will pin back his ears. That's one thing lawyers are good at, is you know, keeping people in the bounds of their power. And if you've ever clerked for a judge, it doesn't all go by what the rules are. It's in large part, do you feel this guy needs to be reined in? And I think the Supreme Court will feel that. What strikes me is how, despite the fact that Obama is untrustworthy on immigration, I mean, he said, I can't amnesty the Dreamers, and then when the election was looming, he said, well, maybe I can. He went ahead and did it anyway. The Republican leadership still presses ahead for amnesty, including John Boehner in the House. And I don't understand why. I mean, Democrats have a perfectly good reason to be for amnesty, which is craven ethnic pandering that's going to ensure our power for the next 2 generations. But what's the Republican excuse?
Next, Mr. Kaus. So isn't doubling the national debt in order to make America prosperous analogous to Russia invading Ukraine to set it free?
Well, I think the better paradox is Reagan's, this is the liberal coming out, there's a few vestigial signs of liberalism left. Reagan saying he was going to increase tax revenues by lowering tax rates. We know how that turned out. It didn't happen. I was reading David Frum, a conservative who may not be that popular, but it turns out he's a conservative economically, but he invests his money on the basis of the theories of Paul Krugman. And he's made a lot of money. And he is very grateful to Krugman, who correctly predicted that inflation wouldn't be a problem and says that our debt isn't all that bad. And I don't think it is all that bad. It is due to explode when the baby boomers need their Medicare, which is very soon. But there's an obvious answer that both parties are going to gravitate towards, which is means test it. Make the rich pay more for their Medicare, keep them in the system, but make them pay more. And I think that will solve the budget problem.
Could I just say 2 things to that? One is, it just has to be said whenever a liberal says what Mickey just said. When Reagan cut taxes, more revenue did come in to the Treasury Department. He got like every year taxes went down. And by the way, I think this is in every single Thomas Sowell book. Every year taxes were cut, more money came into the United States Treasury. The problem was Tip O'Neill would spend 3 times as much for every dollar that would come in. Oh, now we'll spend another 3. And as for your thought on the future of entitlements, again, everything always comes back to immigration. We are talking about bringing in 1.2 million poor people per year here. That's going to be sustaining Social Security. That's going to be sustaining Medicare. And on top of that, something I think people haven't really noticed, what you are well, certainly they've noticed on MSNBC where they are celebrating the browning of America. But if you don't celebrate it, you're a racist. It is going to be people who are not from America, who are going to be, in theory, funding older white people who are getting to their Social Security Medicare age. I don't think that can last. I mean, at some point, they're going to say, screw it.
So a question for you, Ms. Coulter. What's the over-under of number of years before it's illegal to criticize a Democratic president?
I think Obama is different from the rest of them. I mean, I get, as probably a lot of you do, a little depressed thinking about who we're going to run next. But then I look at their field. I mean, once the Obama magic is gone, we are not going to have people fainting at, Joe Biden rallies. And I mean, you sort of have to lobotomize yourself from all of Obama's policies to recognize this, but I do think he is the most charming, elegant, articulate person the Democrats have run for president in my lifetime. You take him out of the equation, what, Hillary, Biden, hopefully Governor Moonbeam, Andrew Cuomo, and then hopefully we'll have free speech against Democrats again.
All right.
Governor Moonbeam isn't that bad. I mean, in California, we see what the future of politics is if we have amnesty, which is
That's
the
true.
Republican Party is irrelevant in California. We don't care about them, all that stuff about abortion, cultural issues. Forget it. It's not in the picture. Democrats are governing the states, and because of that, Democrats have to be responsible. We can't blame Republicans anymore, and the Democrats have been fairly responsible. So one-party government has worked pretty well in California.
All right, so now we take the gloves off. It's you against each other. Mr. Kaus, your question for Ann.
Ann, why haven't Republicans stepped up on amnesty? I don't quite understand it. I spent all day yesterday looking at the Republican new ideas of fighting poverty, because I know you have a positive message of new ideas. And it's really sort of a motley lot of sort of mid-level tinkering with tax rates and allocations, and we'll only fund health care to 3 times poverty, not 4 times poverty. None of that will do good that in any way compensates for the negative effect of amnesty on the wages of unskilled and poor Americans. So Paul Ryan says he's going to lift them up, but he's pushing them down with the other hand.
Right.
What is it with your party that's fallen? The Republican voters don't like it. Look
Right.
what happened to Marco Rubio when he endorsed amnesty.
All
He went
of
down in the polls. Why does the Republican Party persist in this suicidal rush?
It's baffling. It's one of those questions like how high is up, why they keep doing this. I mean, part of it is you do not hear the truth about immigration or amnesty any place in the media. You can hear, I mean, I guess on some of the blogs, there is no issue that is of as much importance to America and Americans that is so hidden from public view as immigration. I mean, you're talking about who votes. One of my friends told me yesterday, I don't know if any of you were in on this, but there was a big Facebook debate someplace about, you know, liberals acting up, and should we just throw Texas out of the union because it's so conservative? And they're going back and forth on this. And I emailed him back and said, well, that's what amnesty does. That's it, 24 million conservative voters, overwhelmed, gone. The country does become California. Why Republicans are rushing headlong into this, some of it is cowardice. They feel like we lost the last election and, oh, please, Hispanics, will you vote for me? Will you vote for me? Well, you know, look at the polls. Hispanics don't care about amnesty. As Mickey just said, who gets hurt by bringing in more low-wage workers? The million you brought in last year, and the year before, and the year before. I mean, my whole life I've heard Republicans hate black people. I've never seen any evidence of it until I read Marco Rubio's amnesty bill. We are the party that has always stood up for African Americans. Who gets hurt the most by amnesty, by continuing these immigration policies? It is low-wage workers, it is Hispanics, it is blacks. And the fact that Republicans don't understand that, can't grasp it, you say Rubio was hurt by it. It wasn't just Rubio. McCain, Bush, as you've written in your blog, it's like a zombie amnesty. We can't kill it. They keep going back to it. And my assumption is it's the lobbyists, and it may not be the congressmen and the senators themselves who want the job lobbying, but I think their staff does.
All right, you got one for Mr. Kaus?
Yeah, what about your party on this? You're allegedly the party of the working class? Who gets hurt by this? I wrote in a column a few weeks ago, and Democrats have opened the door to this. They want to raise the minimum wage. Why don't we raise the minimum wage the way New Zealand and Australia do it? They have $14, $15 minimum wages. You know why? They choose their immigrants wisely. They give you points on the basis of youth, skills, education. What jobs do we need in New Zealand and Australia? And the minimum wage naturally rises. I thought you guys cared about the poor working class.
It's hard for me to defend the Democrats on that. There were some senators like Byron Dorgan a prairie populist who opposed immigration amnesty for precisely this reason. He was defending working class wages. Bernie Sanders opposed amnesty until Obama bought him off with a 1.5 billion BS jobs program. So that took care of Bernie Sanders. There's some journalists on the left of the New Republic, like Tom Frank, who wrote one of the best articles written on immigration amnesty. Says, look, this is a plan for cheap labor. We're on the left. We're supposed to oppose this. You will not see those people on the floor of the Senate until amnesty passes. Then all of a sudden they'll say, well, like Tony Blair says about his immigration policies in Europe, maybe we made a big mistake. Well, then it's too late. That's the difference between the amnesty debate and the tax debate. Is taxes, we can always raise them later or lower them later if we don't like it. Amnesty, there's no do-overs. Once you let people in, they're here.
Yeah. That's why it's more important than Obamacare. And if I could list a few other Democrats, Clinton was in favor of limiting immigration because the Barbara Jordan report came out in those years. Harry Reid once called the anchor baby philosophy, which is not in the Constitution, it is from a Justice Brennan footnote. Harry Reid called the anchor baby law or ruling insanity. Of course it's insanity. So yeah, there were some good Democrats, but now I guess they just think, oh, screw the country, screw low-wage workers. We want our 30 million voters.
And it's the triumph of ethnic politics over economic politics. As an old Marxist, I remember the time in the 60s when people came in and said, no, it's not the proletariat that counts, it's the fact that we're black or Hispanic. And we said, you're crazy, we're Marxists, all workers are the same. It doesn't matter which color they are. But they've won. They've won. They've taken over the Democratic Party.
Another issue. We got a question from Ms. Coulter.
Yes. Charles, this is only tangentially related to amnesty, though everything is. Even Charles Murray agrees that America is coming apart. My right-wing friends agree with it. My left-wing friends agree with it. It's not just that incomes are growing more unequal. That's relatively trivial. But culturally, the rich are growing very distant from the poor in behavioral terms as well as money terms. This is Murray's thesis. The rich have two-parent families, the poor don't anymore, the poor have babies out of wedlock. Does anybody on the right have a solution to this problem?
Yeah, I think Murray does. I think part of the problem is, and I completely agree with Charles Murray on this, I mean, you read these terrifying divorce statistics and then find out they are completely different for college-educated people and those without or with only a high school degree. The unwed motherhood rate, and that, you know, just feeds upon itself. And the one thing that's really changed besides, I mean, you have the government often subsidizing bad behavior, you have Hollywood rewarding bad behavior, but just there's also an overwhelming cultural sense, I think it is a political correctness, that to end shaming. No, we should, shaming is good. This is how, I mean, it's almost a cruel and selfish thing for lack of a better term, for the upper classes, for the educated, for the college graduates, to refuse to tell poor people, keep your knees together before you're married. That will solve so many of life's problems. No, you're interfering with their cultural mores. I mean, there is something very strange about our friend Steve Saylor has written about the problem of littering among immigrant communities. It was something I didn't really live through, but in the 50s, apparently all Americans littered a lot. And who started a campaign shaming Americans out of littering with the Indian and Keep America Beautiful ad? It was actually the corporations themselves, no government action. They were producing these products with you know, disposable cans and plates and so on, and they didn't want it all over the landscape. So it was Anheuser-Busch and other companies got together and funded these ads to shame Americans out of littering. Now, at all of these national parks in California, where the littering is coming from recent immigrants, oh, we can't suggest that any one group is doing it. Let's just shut the park. And that's what they're doing. This is always the solution now. We don't want to stigmatize anyone. No, sometimes stigma is good. They've stigmatized smoking out of existence. How about stigmatizing unwed motherhood, littering, running across the border illegally? How about stigmatizing it? Can we just do that?
I've lost track of whose turn it is, but let me throw in a question from the audience. Usually it comes up every year. It's the marriage proposal.
Oh, could you stand, please?
Right. Mr. Kaus, how about if Hillary Rodham Clinton doesn't run, are you a Biden man?
I'm definitely not a Biden man. I like Ann, I despair of my field until I look at your field. I voted for Obama. I voted for Obama twice, and I voted for him last time because I thought he would enact Obamacare. I didn't realize he'd screw it up, but I thought he'd enact Obamacare, and I thought he wouldn't get amnesty done. And so far, he hasn't disappointed me. He has not gotten amnesty done. And it seems to me that all the Republican candidates, including Ted Cruz, will sell out on amnesty. There's not a single Republican candidate who won't ultimately do the corporation's bidding and try to push it through. The only hope is to elect another Democrat so the Republicans will at least resist him the way they're resisting Obama. That said, the only Democrat I found attractive in the last, aside from Obama, in the last few cycles has been Ed Rendell. He took on the unions. He's relatively candid. And he obviously has broad appeal.
Here's a question. Who's your pick for 2016?
Well, this responds to something Mickey just said about all the, and by the way, right before I think it was 2008 election, you and I had an ongoing and vicious debate over which one would be more enthusiastic about amnesty, McCain or Obama. And I'll admit, it's close in the end. But no, look, I mean, Obama is trying to do everything he can. It's not elected Republicans. It's the American people who are stopping Republicans. And I think that's probably the best hope for our candidates, because again, there's no, to quote Mickey Kaus, I used to think everything was about sex. Now I realize everything is about immigration. It determines every single other issue. And of course, that's how we've got to pick our presidential nominee. And just, a little footnote, that's why Mitt Romney was my favorite candidate. He was the most aggressive on immigration. He was, and in a way that was very appealing. I mean, in that first debate, he had one of the best answers. If I had had 2 weeks to write an answer, and it was, for illegal immigrants, do you want to, give them driver's licenses and in-state tuition? Well, half the Republicans on stage had already done that. And Mitt Romney said, no, I will appeal to Hispanics the way Republicans always have. We're offering freedom and liberty and a chance at a better life for you and your children. And any Hispanics who are here for a handout aren't voting for Republicans anyway. It was a beautiful and perfect answer. I mean, they made fun of self-deportation, which I never really understood, except that I think liberals and the media have a capacity. They could turn the phrase apple pie into, ooh, he said apple pie. But of course, that's our solution to immigration, which is why you can't believe these fake polls on, most Americans support a path to legalization. That's because I look up every one of these polls, and the question is always, do you want to, you only have this binary question, 2 options, do you want to round up illegal immigrants at gunpoint, put them on buses, send them home, ripping children from grandmothers, or Would you like to put them on a path to legalization where they have to learn English and take lessons in patriotism and pay back taxes, of which there are none? They'd be getting money back under the Earned Income Tax Credit. But no, look, there's no politician in Washington who's suggesting rounding anybody up. We didn't round them up to get them here. We're not going to round them up to get them home. We just enforce E-Verify. When the jobs dry up and, say, college tuition subsidized by the taxpayers. And now, as we know, please, every conservative remember this, what Joe Wilson got in trouble for, and everyone was hysterical over Representative Joe Wilson at President Obama's State of the Union address when he yelled out, "You lie." It was because Republicans had been fighting for 2 weeks with the Democrats to exclude illegal immigrants from getting Obamacare, and Obama stood up at the State of the Union and said that absolutely no illegal immigrants will be able to get Obamacare. And in a moment of passion and rage, Joe Wilson yelled out, "You lie." Well, we found out this week Joe Wilson was right. Obama was lying. He has now announced, to illegal aliens, yes, please sign up for Obamacare. This will not be used to deport you. I think the only way to get the Republicans, well, other than Romney, the Republicans running for president, I mean, it's the damnedest thing with the Republicans. It's like Invasion of the Body Snatchers. You think, oh, he's so good on taxes, so good on national defense. Oh, wants to give the Democrats 30 million new voters. I think it has to be pressure from Americans. And the reason Americans often fall down on the job is you will not read anything about this in your local newspaper, in the New York Times and the Washington Post. You will not see it on television. That is one thing I will give the amnesty and mass immigration proponents. They know, let's not talk about it. Let's do it all hush-hush and try to slip it through, because the more people know the truth about immigration, Marco Rubio's bill, by the way, tripled legal immigrants. Most Americans do not favor a path to legalization. When you hear them going on and on about, oh, the children. The children under the DREAM Act include young men who snuck across at age 17. Some of them are in their 30s now. I mean, overwhelmingly, throughout history, throughout the world, most immigrants are young males, and they'll send for their families later. This nonsense about families being broken up and, oh, the children. It's not as if people crossing the border illegally in the back of trucks marked, Pico de Gallo, hiding in barrels, running from the border guards. It's not like they didn't know what they were doing was wrong. Everyone acts like they just, stumbled into the country. Oh gosh, I didn't know that was illegal.
That's why it was so disappointing for me to read on November 15th, 2013, where Romney, in an interview with Fox Latino, endorsed a path to citizenship and legalization. I tell you, Ann, everybody on your side will sell out on amnesty except for Jeff Sessions. He's about the only one.
All right, we're right about at the end of time. So,
Romney's going for his obituary in the New York Times.
Mr. Kausch, your first 90 seconds, best case for liberals and Democrats in 2014.
You just made it.
We won't get amnesty. They'll fix.
How do you win in 2014?
How do we win?
Yeah, if the Democrats are going in front of the voters, how would they?
We're not going to win.
So you get.
I'm saying.
Well, case closed.
At this point with Obamacare, it's like the Iraq War. The fastest way out is to go through. The best path to certainty is to get it done, then we can fiddle with it later once it's up and running. And Obama will not produce amnesty. At least he's the best chance of not producing amnesty is that Republicans will stand up to him because they don't trust him. I mean, look at you're supposed to pay a fine to qualify for the amnesty. Obama will waive the fine. There's not going to be a fine. We know that. Everybody knows that. So the best hope for those two big things is to vote for the Democrats.
Why should Americans vote Republicans?
It's the only way to repeal Obamacare. I keep hearing people say on TV, oh, don't get in the way. It's falling on its own. Nothing falls on its own. We have all kinds of heinous government programs. Public education, the Amtrak food service, the post office, the IRS. Nothing ever falls on its own. The only way to get rid of Obamacare, and by the way, I'm an individual out there. I'm part of the 1% that didn't get a waiver. Wait till it comes to you. You will not be able to get an English-speaking doctor who went to an American medical school. I mean, unless you leave the country, find one. Maybe on an Indian reservation. That, I think, is going to be an argument, and the only thing that is going to hurt it is, and I mean, obviously, I'm disappointed in Republicans. The only thing that matters more is immigration. Immigration is forever. It is game over when that happens. Oh, and by the way, every Republican voted against Obamacare. So there's no trying to figure out, is he going to vote against Obamacare? I mean, some are better than others. I don't really like hearing him say, we're going to keep the good parts of Obamacare. What is that? But amnesty is forever, and I think you got to vote for the Republicans one more time and just make it clear. But if you pass amnesty, that's it, it's over. Then we organize the death squads for the people who wrecked America.
Thank you. Thank you. Give a round of applause for Mickey Kaus for showing up and Ann Coulter.
Thank you.